It's rigged. All right. Those of you that have dogs that are resource guarders, those of you that are starting out with young puppies, or perhaps you've just rescued, adopted, purchased, whatever, a dog, and you want to work on making sure your dog doesn't resource guard, or that the resource guarding doesn't get worse than what it is, stop sticking your hands in their dish. Stop making them crazy when they eat. Stop getting in their face and in their space when they are enjoying things. That is just going to double down on the problems. If every time I have a cup of coffee or a snack, someone comes around and starts messing with me, after a while, when I see them coming, I want to get the hell out of there. Problem is, your dog doesn't have that option. What you want to do is change your dog's perception. The real power in training comes from when we can cause the dog to have a shift in their perception of what does X, Y, or Z represent. So X, Y, or Z in this case is us coming around them while they have something. If you're starting out with a young pup, great thing. Let's say this is their food dish right here. The dog is here enjoying its food. You can be in the distance. Just toss one or two treats that are more appealing than the food. In dog trainer lingo, you'll hear people talk about higher value. So something that's more interesting to the dog. Toss a couple of pieces and walk away. Do that a few times when your dog is eating, and watch the response when you come around. Now the dog could give a rip about this thing because you have better stuff. And when you come around, you share your better stuff with the dog, and then you leave. So when you come around, the dog isn't bunking down on this. The dog is saying, I could walk away from this, like it's not the end of the world, and I'll go with you. And now you have a dog that's less prone to being defensive. If you have a dog that is already resource guarding, you can do this as well, but you need to take safety precautions. You might want to have a gate between where the dog is with its item and yourself. You might want to be on the other side of a fence if you think your dog is that high risk. You may want to do it in such a way where you have safety layers in play. The biggest thing you can do as well is to create distance. Because a dog, just like a person, has what we call a critical distance. When you're 5 feet away, I'm ready to go to war. With some dogs, when you're 30 feet away, I'm ready to go to war. It depends on the dog. So you need to know what your dog's critical distance is, and you need to operate well outside of that if your dog is already resource guarding. And again, you're trying to shift perception. If you're going to keep getting in the dog's face, if you're going to keep messing with the dog's food, it is such a flawed logic. I'm going to go there and mess with his stuff to teach him that he doesn't mind when I'm around. Most people look at it as, I'm going to teach him to be tolerant, where I can assure you, if the dog is tolerant, you would have had a tolerant dog no matter what. There is this flawed logic that correlation equals causation. Correlation is not causation. It's very important to understand that. There's so many false positives in training. I was in a pet store a couple of months ago, and I watched someone say sit to their dog at the counter when they were waiting to pay. I was paying, I was tapping my card. And the lady told her dog to sit 30 times, 40 times. Like, it was crazy. Sit, 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 sit. Finally, the dog sits. And he sat because you can see he's looking over the counter at the cashier, and she's already winding up to give him a treat. And clearly he knows what's going to happen. She actually believed the dog said. Like, she looked at the dog and said, well, thank you, finally. And I was like, what? What universe am I living in right now? Correlation does not equal causation. The dog did not sit, lady, because you said sit 648 times. He just happened to sit because he couldn't see where the person was, and probably the person behind the counter who's holding all the cards, who has the power play in their hand, says sit, and the dog sits. So be aware that if you're doing this with the puppy, and the long-term goal is that you won't resource guard and you won't mind when we come around your food, if it ends up that the dog doesn't mind, you would have been there anyways. I work with so many dogs every day that come from a breeder that go from a TLC birthplace to a TLC family, and yet the dog is scared of people, of dogs. The dog's been socialized. The dog is scared of a paper bag, a plastic bag, if those exist anymore, a balloon, a car. Why? What reason did it have? Correlation is not causation. The dog was not abused. The dog is just what it is. The same way, sometimes I work with hard cases, street dogs, dogs that have been abused, dogs that have a rough history, that they have no right to be as social and sweet and optimistic towards the world as they are. Correlation is not causation. Everything is a case-by-case individual thing. So you have to understand that just because your dog has this and you have the intention of, hey, my dog is going to share with me and like to share with me, so I'm going to get in there and mess with this, and I'll give him some, and I'll even give him some extra stuff. You're going to create a problem, or you're going to be okay where you would have been okay anyway, so why bother doing it? Because if you leave it alone, at least you're not going to create that problem. And if you approach it my way, where I'm telling you, just toss a few things at a distance and then walk away, watch how fast your dog's story changes. Watch. I'll make a follow-up video to this where sometimes in the morning I'll have an apple with some peanut butter and I'll just push a slicer through my apple. I'll take a bite of the slice and then give the second half of that bite of that slice to my dog. He could be in the middle of eating, and when he eats, he's like a shop vac. He's all business. He'll leave that and come running, and he loves his food. The dog loves his food. He's insane with his food. He'll leave that and come running for the apple, and then he hasn't even swallowed the apple and he's running back to his food. But there's something there where he says, yeah, I'd like that. And then when that's gone, when that resource has dried up, I'll go back to what is still exciting, but not as exciting as the apple. That's that perception shift that we want. Now with my dog, you can stick your face in his bowl. There's never going to be an issue. He was born that way. I didn't make him that way. I just made sure not to screw it up. Simple as that. No training is always better than bad training. Because bad training, you're going to dig yourself into a hole. That's like someone not knowing a thing about cars and trying to work on their car. It's going to get worse. Whatever the problem is you have right now is going to be worse by the time you're done messing with your car. Okay? So no training is better than bad training. And of course, good training trumps everything. So don't get in there and mess up your dog. Don't get in there and try to prove to yourself that it's all going to work out and you'll be okay. Shift your dog's perception. That's the real power in dog training.